Folks, welcome to the show where sometimes our wires get crossed, but our swords always are. And it is the most magical time of the year for any fan of the blue and gold, or of course the goat head. The Sabres are back in camp. They are back in equipment. They are back in action. And in some ways, that's a good thing. And in some ways, that's a ridiculously bad thing today. So with that said, back in the saddle, let's bring in our teammate, you know him, you love him, our goaltender, Gatesy, and of course, joining anything train wreck, this year, taking it by the horns, Mr. Mike Bunt. Folks, welcome. SabresCamp is back, and we're already with overreactions and crazy takes aplenty, gentlemen.
It's who would have thought on day one we'd have crazy overreactions from Buffalo Sabres fans, but here we are, and I'm so excited for the Sabres season to get underway in just a couple weeks.
Yeah, it took less than an hour to get the overreactions. It's unbelievable. You have an entire offseason of overreactions, and then you get a little bit of a break. And then within a half an hour, they all come back. It's the toxicity of being a Buffalo Sabres fan. You got to love it, but I honestly hate it.
Yeah, I got to admit, I looked at the pre-practice pressers, at what Adams was saying, at what Ruff was saying. I got just the right amount of fired up. I got it in my blood. My blood was, moving. It was SabresCamp is underway. It was like, oh, wow, who's going to steal this spot? Who's going to steal this spot? I literally put my phone down. I, go to work for about 30 to 45 minutes, pick my phone up, and I'm just trying to innocently re-enter the timeline. And the first note that I see it had the S next to it. It wasn't even like a 6M. It had the S next to it. Rasmus Dahlin has exited practice. Are Sabres fans wrong to overreact to such a thing 30 minutes into the first day of SabresCamp?
You see Rasmus Dahlin name going out. I think it raises concerns like what is going on, because he's been a guy that's consistently been on this ice since 2018. But I think Butt and I were talking earlier, maybe, the stomach's bothering him. Who knows what's going on? Still no update on what it could be. But I think as Sabres fans, there's no chance we'd ever overreact to anything and any news possibility, let alone on day one. But we'll see what comes out of it. But it is kind of a scary thought to think of Rasmus Dahlin not being on this team on night one. But I don't know about you, Butt.
I'm not even going to worry about it right now because we have no information. And this is the one thing as a former reporter that I'm different than fans, but I don't worry until there's a reason to worry. We haven't been told anything. So some people are going to be like, oh my God, he left. The ice didn't return. Oh, it's the end of the world. He's going to miss the beginning of the season. Or he might have just had to take a shit and maybe he's perfectly fine and he'll be on the ice tomorrow. The reason why you don't need to overreact is because there's going to be a practice tomorrow and we'll find out if he's on the ice then or not. And if he's not on the ice for a second straight day, then you can raise your level of concern just a little bit. But if he's back out there, then you just realized you've spent 24 hours talking about nothing. So we'll see what happens. I'm hoping it's nothing, but if it is something, well, that would be the Sabres way. We've lived through it all anyway, so we'll survive either way. Maniac,
why do I do it to myself? Hopefully this isn't a Kevin Cobb situation, but we got Stephen Noble obviously checking in. The way Lindy chuckled at the injury, I think he may have rolled it out. I think it's something else here. I think you have a good point, Bunt, that the trajectory should be to wait and see, and eventually then you can overreact. But at the same time, I think the reason you overreact is the same reason you don't overreact, because it is Dahlin and he should be right back out there. It probably is nothing, but it is Dahlin. I think if it was like Samuelson or something, people would already be seeing same old or whatever. They'd be talking, drumming up that conversation. But I think the fact that it's such a crucial part of anything you want to achieve this year, that's the fact that makes it such a worrisome thing. And speaking of worrisome things, practice was getting rough. We had guys throwing bodies. What do you think of these updates? What do you think about, Lindy Ruff yelling about offsides? This seems like a no-brainer to me, and I love to see it.
Who would have thought? I think we all remember the video of Casey Middlestat. As soon as he gets traded to Colorado, he's like, man, these pregame skates, they're a lot more tiring than the ones we're doing in Buffalo. And I think I saw every reporter who was at practice, they tweet out videos of guys hunched over, tired, working hard. And that is such a great change for this Buffalo Sabres team. They're young and they're fast. They should use that to their advantage. In practices like these, as much as they probably suck to go through, they're going to be so much better for this team in the long run. They're deep into games. They're not going to be giving up these, late third period games. They're going to be fun. They're going to be exciting, be fast again. And I think this Lindy Ruff thing, this coaching style from him is going to be really good for the Sabres team. And this is just such a great change of pace from the Sabres coaching. I think we've had the past, I don't know, decade at this point, where it's kind of been helping the players out a little more lax. These players haven't earned that lax coaching style yet. Let's see what Ruff can do. And I'm excited from this day one.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. In the past, when people would talk about things being lax at Sabres practice, not being difficult, I didn't really think too much about it, because whenever a player leaves, they're going to always say positive things about their new franchise. And you don't know if it's just sour grapes or if it's just them pumping up their new team. But then when you hear Casey Middlestat, kind of what he went through in Colorado, you're like, maybe it is a little bit too easy on these guys in Buffalo. And then Lindy comes in, you expect it to be a little bit more difficult. So I am kind of excited that you hear things like when they go off sides, he's stopping the play and basically trying to correct things. Because this is a team that I think a lot of us, the three of us, would agree is pretty talented. They got a lot of good young players on this squad, but what is holding them back? It's youth, inexperience, mental mistakes, and not really being able to face adversity. So I like the idea of challenging this team from a mental and physical perspective. So when you start the year, you're ready right out of the gate, and no more of this getting off to slow starts or putting yourself behind the 8 ball. This team needs to be ready to play first 2 games in Europe against the Devils, and we'll see where it goes from there. But I'm encouraged that it seemed like it was a little bit rougher day one. Now, I don't want Peyton Krebs taking out Tage Thompson. Like, that's the last thing I want to be hearing about. But I am encouraged by the other stuff I was reading today.
Yeah, we could jump around a little bit. Let's do that, and then we'll kind of boomerang back to the end of camp here and some of the rosterology. But we got Krebs obviously signed, kind of a domino to fall. We were talking in the pre-show. I guess we can kind of reverse, because I think, Bunt, you were kind of going into it about how this kind of gets the Sabres under that dreaded 7 million mark of empty cap space, and basically just enough to make one last cherry pick move if they really wanted to. I think the real lamenting from Sabres fans was like, oh, well, if you're leaving 7 to 9 million on the table, you could be filling that spot with a superstar. But now it seems like it makes a little bit more sense and just kind of leaves them a little potential room to run if they need it, versus, oh, they have to go fill that spot.
Yeah. You look at the 7 million, it's not preferable. You don't want to have $7 million of cap, especially when you have the longest playoff drought in NHL history. And this seems like a make or break year for the franchise. But you do leave yourself a little bit of space if you need to make a move, if the team is struggling early on and you feel like you need to add another piece, whether that be a trade. Obviously, free agency, things didn't go the way many fans were hoping for. I do think that this team is stronger overall, and I do believe that the bottom 6 is going to make games a lot more difficult for their opponents. On paper, they have the tools that they need to make the playoffs overall. And I think that's why fans get upset with that 7 million in cap space, because they're like, you just need to make one more move. Just make one more move. And when you don't see it happen, I understand the frustration. But at the end of the day, they have the ability to get to where they want with these guys.
Yeah, and I think my biggest thing with the Krebs signing is the 2 years at 1.5 just seems a little set in stone for this team right now, where I think a lot of us were kind of expecting a little bit of a bridge deal for Krebs, and the wait was kind of concerning just because it was Peyton Krebs. We're kind of concerned, why is it taking so long? The Sabres have a bajillion dollars in cap space right now. It's not a cap issue. So we'll see what happens there. And I like that they're giving him the confidence where, they're going to have him this year to prove it, but they're also going to have him around next year with a little bit of security as well, where they're going to trust these younger guys like they've been doing the past, 3-4 years, where they've been signing their guys. And we'll see what comes of that from Peyton Krebs. But it is interesting with this Lance tweet that kind of ask Peyton Krebs' agent. I
didn't see this earlier. This is fucking sassy from Kevin with a Y. He might listen. And everyone knows I'm a Kevin with a Y guy. So this is me razzing my guy. For lack of success, he might be the sassiest GM in the league. honestly, because he has no right to be this sassy and like throwing around like zingers. Like he should absolutely be feeling a little bit of the hot seat. Like his heated seat is turned to medium for sure. But yeah, I mean, I thought this, I was literally just scrolling the timeline just now. I missed this earlier. So
when you see the numbers that Peyton Krebs got, though, I think this is a fair quote from Kevin Adams. $1.45 million is definitely an overpay for a guy that honestly has done next to nothing in his NHL career. A guy that was supposed to be highly skilled, but ends up playing on your fourth line when he does get promoted to the third or the second line, does absolutely nothing. Like you've seen guys, a bunch of Sabres where they can move up and down the lineup. They can still get some points. Peyton Krebs hasn't shown anything on this team to the point where a lot of fans are wondering, is he even a starter for this squad? Is he on one of your top four lines to open the season? To get $1.45 million would tell me, yeah, there's probably a good chance. Yes, Creek, I do need to get some sunblock because I am red as an apple right now. But it does ask some. I think what Adams basically is saying there is it's like, we gave you more than enough money. You could have taken this deal a long time ago. Why were you holding out until now? So I think that's more so Adams being like,
you should have been in the Sabres workout room or whatever.
So I think that's what Adams is getting to. And then one more thing about the cap number and everything. When you are $7 million under the cap in all these years where they've been under and not even really close to spending to the cap, I do think it brings up the fair question of, is there an internal cap within this franchise? I know a lot of fans have speculated about it. There's been media that have talked about it. No one really seems to have an answer. I think most of us assume there might be. But then when you have so many quality young prospects, the counter would be, well, we need room in the future to sign these guys. But not all of them are going to pan out. So you're not going to give all of them the big deals that you might be saving for. And then at the same time, even if you are saving all that money for Peterka, for Quinn, and other guys down the line, well, you still have $7 million this year. You couldn't find somebody for a 1 year, just give them a $5 million, $6 million deal. Like maybe they're a $3 million, $4 million player, but you overpay to get them to Buffalo, because that's the other thing. We keep saying, well, so-and-so is not interested in coming to Buffalo. Well, if you pay somebody $2.5 million more than what they want, well, you finish out your roster. You got somebody that maybe he is your second line guy, your third line guy, but at least you got to finish up your roster. But to me, I think it's more Kevin Adams sending a message where we're not going to overpay for guys just so we can get to a cap number. We have confidence in our guys now. Internal cap, is there one? I don't know. But I think once this team starts winning, talk of an internal cap isn't going to exist anymore.
Not at all. And that internal cap, I think it's like a boogeyman situation. Don't ask, don't tell. Like, it's scary if it exists. I think it's disheartening and criminal if the Sabres have an internal cap with how poorly things have been going. But yeah, like you're saying, Bun, like they had this money, then they bought out Jeff Skinner, and they're doing it this year. We're not going to go down that slippery slope right now, but they're hurting themselves down the future by doing it now. I think there's a lot of questions for that internal cap just because of that reason. They're paying them an extra like $2 million in like 2026. I think a big year for the Sabres in signing contracts. So we'll see what comes out of it more as these young guys come up, and hopefully the Sabres are one penny under the cap in a couple of years where we can kind of put this whole thing to bed.
There's only one other internal cap I've heard about in this entire calendar year of 2024, and that was the internal cap by Warner Brothers Discovery imposed upon HBO Max for season 2 of House of the Dragon. And let me tell you, that completely ruined the season. So we cannot have an internal cap ruin this season. With that said, but you do make a good point that a lot of people don't recognize the and yeah, you could say you're saving for some. There's not really a ton of room. And yes, the Pagulas should be spending to the cap every season. They're no doubt making money hand over fist with the bills and everything there, like to make up the difference. I know there's some operating costs. I know the Sabres were losing money for a little bit there. I totally get that. With the owner's agreement and the revenue sharing from the NFL, they're absolutely in the green. They should be spending to the cap, but there is a diligence that it has to be done with. And just remember at the very end of it, and I know that people do not like to hear this, the Pagulas came here and they spent out the fucking wazoo. They were getting air off. There was no item that they were not buying or that they were not trying to buy when they came here immediately. And you know what happened? It was a big fucking flop. So they kind of learned from that. And then I think they kind of pulled all the way back. And only now are they getting to the point where they're comfortable spending again with someone that they've had tenure with, that they realize they can't just buy winning. They kind of have to cook it within. With that said, speaking of cooking within, that's what these prospects are about. This is what this grinding camp's all about. We got a great comment here from Stevan Noble. It's just nice to know that we have players for battling for starting spots versus knowing who's going to be in the top 12 and 6. And that goes to certain JK, but he's not just kidding around, Yuri Kulich. A lot of talk around this. Where do you guys fall in on where Kulich should fall on the roster and any other prospect challenge takeaways? Gatesy, what do you got?
Yeah, I think it's something, I know Butt and I were talking a little earlier where this was, I think, something we're all hoping for going into last year. We're wanting Kulich to get called up. We want to see this all happen for the Sabres. And now that's happened. We're like, whoa, how'd this happen? Where's this coming from? And I know I put out a couple tweets before the prospect challenge. If Kulich has a good prospect challenge, he's going to be in that conversation to be in the top 9 for the Sabres. And I think the more we're looking at these lines for your blue and gold, the more it makes sense to have him in your top 9 there. And move Jordan Greenway 4th line, get him out of there. And your top 9, I think, looks really good with a lot of good young players. And the Sabres, I think, would look like a much more fun team. I know we talked last episode with Bunt, where we have Zach Benson hopefully making that top 6, playing alongside Dylan Cousins and Jack Quinn. And if Kulich can make that jump, I think he has to do it because he's been in the AHL, 3 years now? 2 years?
2 full years, yeah.
2 full years. I think the longer he's in Rochester, the worse that will be for him making the team in the long run, because eventually he's going to have to make that jump. Let's do it now. Let's get him in the organization now. Get him with Lindy now as well. Not to mention Seth Apper is up coaching the power play again. He's going to be with his coach. He's had great success within Rochester. I'm all aboard the Yuri Kulich train right now, making this team. And I think it is, like Steven Noble did say, it's good to see guys fighting for position. I think every single year since, I feel like forever, it's been this Buffalo Sabres roster is going to look like this. And we're talking about that in May. And that's exactly what it is. I think last year we had the big Zach Benson surprise, which was great. The more of that, the better. And it's nice to see prospects we put so much stock in pan out in some capacity, make that jump to the NHL and go from there. But I think based off the prospect challenge, he looked really good, and we're excited to see where things go in just a couple more weeks.
I think Steve is probably going to kill you guys if you say Noble one more time. I'm pretty sure it's Noble, but no worries either way. Steve loves all of our train wreck content, so appreciate you commenting, Steve. What I'll say is I'm with Gatesy on the lines. I think it's a positive if Kulich makes this squad, especially because with the new group of prospects that are infiltrating Rochester, it'll give them an opportunity to test themselves on a top 6 at the American Hockey League level. I want to see guys like Anton Wahlberg step up in Rochester and some of the other guys down there. But yeah, top line, day one, the first thing that I saw on Twitter this morning, and I was just so enthusiastic to see it, was that they had damn, I'm having a brain fart right now. They had Peterka with Thompson and Tuck on the first line. I've been calling for that the entire offseason. The few games that they had down the stretch playing together, the numbers look great. Peterka looked like he fit perfectly with Thompson and Tuck. I think he rounds out that line, and it does a lot of good for the entire lineup. First of all, we know that Cousins and Quinn bring out the best in each other. So you really don't need Peterka on the second line to solidify that line. If you can have Peterka on the first line, I think that brings out the best in Thompson and Tuck. Then you have Quinn and Cousins together. I think they're going to bring a lot of offense. There's a lot of numbers that show that Quinn brings out a better version of Cousins, which is why I'm so confident that Cousins is going to have a bounce back year overall. And if you're talking Benson or Kulich with Cousins and Quinn, you know what the Sabres are saying? We're going to find a way to score some goals with these young kids. This kid line is going to be the kid line 1.2 or 2.0, whatever you want to call it, because you're going to have 2 of the same guys, but a new kid take over for Peterka. The other one that doesn't fit in there, put him with Zucker and McLeod, and then suddenly you got a third line that can fly, that can be a two-way. Like Benson, if he's on the third line and it's Zucker and McLeod, that's a pretty good third line right there. But even if it's Kulich, I'm now thinking third line, We got a sniper on this line. We got a former 20-goal scorer in Zucker, and we got a dynamic two-way skater in McLeod that can get up and down the ice. I'm starting to feel pretty good about the offensive prospects of this team. And then you finish it out with the fourth line with Abe Kubel, Malenstein. It could be Krebs, Greenway, whoever you want to put down there. Lafferty. And then you got some grit. You got some physicality, speed to finish it up. I know Sabres fans look at this team and they're asking right now, where's the scoring coming from? And they keep asking, are you depending too much on the kids? And they're frustrated because that's what last year was supposed to be, the year before that. But I really look at it, and I think right now you got Thompson and Tuck who are taking that big contribution point. Cousins is now not a kid anymore. He's expected to be better. If you can get this depth to step up, I think that's a good forward group. I think they're going to score more goals. And then defensively, that's where you have your most elite prospects on this team. You got UPL locked up. You got Levi in the wings. And if Levi isn't ready, you got Reimer. I know there's questions, but I look at this team. I think they're good. I think this is a good team. I'm not saying they're top of their division, but on paper, they seem to be a playoff team in the making.
It only took us 21 minutes to bring up the P word and some
I've been saying it
optimism out of
all off season.
I agree.
I'll be the village idiot. I don't care.
Are you
when this team makes the playoffs, I'm taking all the receipts and I'm going to look at everybody in Buffalo that made fun of me last year for saying that next year they'd be a playoff team. I'm going to be, you know what? I'm going to be having fun with it. But if they have 80 points or less, I'm not going to exist on this podcast anymore.
Yeah, make sure you delete them all. Make sure them all. Gatesy, what do you got for the roster traffic? Obviously, you got Kulich. Anybody else you're bullish on as camp kind of takes shape here?
I think that's really it right now, based on just the offseason moves of bringing in so many bottom six guys where, you bring Kulich up, which is great, but really then you're going to have to start cutting guys that you signed. You're going to have to trade guys, waive guys. And I don't see the way the current Sabres lineup is of seeing any point of having an Isaac Rosean, a Noah Ostlund, a Wahlberg on your fourth line for this year. Give them some high quality minutes in Rochester. But when injuries do arise, there's going to be good players to fill these ranks up. We're not going to have some guy we've never heard of show up and play a couple games and then we'll never see him again. These are going to be guys we know. They're going to be solid NHLers or high-end prospects. And I think it's a really exciting prospect for this Buffalo Sabres team. And I think outside of that, I think the only real vision or contention is, that backup goalie position. Will Devin Levi make that jump up, or will it be James Reimer? Levi got new pass today. Could be a new man, but we'll see what goes on that. I think a UPL Levi duo would just be fantastic to see that live in action and kind of get some hopes up a little bit as well.
Yeah, and I think it was.
I didn't know if you were saying something right there, Maniac, or not, but The Athletic, they did an article during the summer where they ranked the goalie situations of every team in the NHL. And it came to a surprising conclusion, not only to themselves, but for probably hockey fans across North America. They had the Sabres goalie room as the third best goalie situation in the NHL. Now, they ranked it off of a few different criteria, and they didn't have bias into it either because they just assigned everything equal value. One was current situation. Number two was future situation. And then it was prospects in the pipeline. And basically we're saying right now, the Sabres are no worse than average. They're average to maybe they could be slightly above average if a few things pan out. But UPL, you already have at least an average goalie. And then with Reimer and Levi as the backups, you have average backups. So you're decent in that. We're no longer in the Sabres of 2 years ago where their goaltending sucks. But then if you go in the prospect situation, Levi is still regarded as a prospect. He's considered one of the top goaltending prospects in hockey. So you have an elite pipeline there. And then you just added to it a little bit over the last few years too. So you have other guys in the wings as well. And then you project UPL, you got a 4 or 5 year deal with him now. You're going to have Levi under contract long-term. So not only do you have decent goaltending, it's not going anywhere. So you have a possibility of, say UPL doesn't pan out and this was just a one-year wonder. Well, Levi could still play 45, 50 games, and you can have UPL as a backup. And if UPL is a backup playing 30 games, you're still going to get solid results. I think for the first time in a long, long time, you look at the Sabres forwards, you look at their defensemen, you look at their goaltending. They have solid players in each spot, but they also have solid prospects that can step up in each spot. And that is what is encouraging. They used to just be top heavy. I think the Sabres have not only high-end talent, but I think they have depth in every spot in their roster. The only question I have is, are these young players going to be able to take their game to the next level that we all eventually anticipate?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing from the prospect challenge, too, from a Kulich perspective, was he looked a lot bigger and a lot more confident with the puck. I think last year he really struggled in his couple games with Buffalo. He just looked small. He got pushed off of pucks a lot. Granted, the prospect challenge is a lot of younger guys there as well. But I remember the Sabres broadcast was talking about how he put on a lot of weight this summer. And that's going to be really big for him this season, where he can hopefully hang on a third-line role with the Buffalo Sabres, where he might have to get a little chippy. But I think that's going to be a big thing for him and these younger prospects as well, as just getting bigger, getting that size, because the Sabres top six is pretty set in stone. So for these prospects to make that jump, they're going to have to add another dimension to their game.
Kind of pulling the strings together on what you guys have said on this first inaugural episode season. My new take is that they're either above 92 points or below 77 from everything you just said. I agree. I just think there's no in between, because you guys talked about the dynamics added by Lindy. There's a lot of boom bust candidates. Will Cousins return to his scoring touch? Will Quinn finally make that full-time NHL jump? Can Peterka have a follow-up? If Peterka does what he does last year, it just feels like, well, the offense is guaranteed then. But then speaking of what they did last year, can UPL continue to obviously, I think we would all just take what UPL did last year, given, the final results. But can he continue to get better? Can UPL and Levi run a 2-goalie system with not a lot of veteran experience? Is that something that could potentially trouble them? But a lot of storylines are going in, so very interested there. Let's finish it up here with the top storyline that everyone has been talking about all season and had a little bit of a wrench thrown in it today with the Dahlin disappearance. Captain Watch. I got my vote. I am all in on Alex Tuch. I like the culture and morality of it, and I just like the idea that he might not be our quote-unquote best skilled, talented output player, and this kind of takes him to another level and lets the Tages, the Dahlins, those other guys focus on scoring and dominating.
Gatesy, you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Up until you said that, Maniac, I was a Dahlin truther a little bit, but the Alex Tuch, he is basically the first line right winger of the Buffalo Sabres and one of the least talked about guys in terms of production. He reminds me a lot in terms of his on ice play, but also off ice, of Dustin Brown from the LA Kings from the 2010s, a guy who was a leader on the team and put up points, but he wasn't the all-star. He wasn't the number one guy, but he was a leader in the locker room. And a lot of the issues the Sabres have had the past decade has been in leadership. You look at the Sabres captain, we named Eichel captain way too early. And we all know how that went, that whole situation. Not our favorite one. But I think Alex Tuch, he's a guy. He's from, Western New York, from Syracuse area. He's a local guy. Lindy, Ruff. A million storylines about why this is such a big deal for him. And I think that could really translate to this team. And again, like Maniac said, leave Dahlin to do his thing on the ice. Let the captain, really just keep the team together and keep the boat moving in the right direction. Alex Tuch has found success in the playoffs with Vegas. Granted, he didn't lift the cup with them, but he was a key part of that team. And I think as the season progresses, the Sabres are known to shoot themselves in the foot at least once and go on a skid. Your captain's got to be the guy to ring it all together. That didn't happen with Eichel. It didn't happen with Okposo. Alex Tuch could be that guy, though.
So Steve says Tage Thompson, based on what he said in the exit interviews last year. I love Tage Thompson, but I'm not going to let Maniac change my opinion of who should be the captain. And Gatesy, you need to have more willpower. I know he runs things around
Rusty
here.
Brown on the mind. What can I say?
You know what? I'm not as gullible to change my opinion. I'm Dahlin all in on Dahlin, and I respect your points, Maniac, about how you want to let your captain, you want Dahlin to focus on his game, and that your captain should be a voice, but not always your most skilled player. The Sabres definitely have messed up in the past with guys like Jack Eichel, who was not a leader on and off the ice. He was the most skilled player, but definitely not the guy that should be the voice of your franchise. But Dahlin is different to me. This is a guy that has been here for an extended period of time. He's gone through the tough years, but he also has signed this extension, showing a commitment to the team long term. And I understand that Eichel did the same thing early in his career, but Dahlin, the way he leads on and off the ice, I think he's a much different person than what Jack Eichel was. He is physical. He embraces doing the hard things on the ice. He is skilled. I think he wants to be a leader of the group. He wants to be part of the turnaround in this franchise. And while I think Alex Tuch could be a tremendous captain as well, I think this is where the contract plays a little bit of a role. Right now, Tuch is not going to be a Sabre for the long-term future unless he signs an extension. Maybe he will be, maybe he won't. But Dahlin, we know, is going to be part of this franchise for years to come. And I think that's probably what gives him a little bit of an edge. And also the fact that he is homegrown and he has been with several of these guys for a very long time. I think maybe he just has a little bit more of a voice in that locker room based on just experience and time in this franchise.
All right, there you have it. Our panel's thoughts. Make sure you are on the line all season long. We do have press access, so we'll be at practices, games eventually. I have season tickets. We'll see how that goes, how far I go before regarding that decision. It might be already, but make sure you're tuned in. Crossing Swords podcast on our podcast channel, anything Trainwreck Sports, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and everything else. But with that said, the season is just about 2 weeks and 2 days away. Yes, 2 weeks and 2 days away. So strap in, because you know this is the show where sometimes we do get our wires sauced, but our swords always are. Let's go Sabres.